A couple of years ago, my wife and I moved our family to Paris for a year. We wanted to get outside of our comfort zones, immerse ourselves in another culture. I think my two daughters would say we also wanted to make life really miserable for them by putting them into French public school when they didn't speak any of the language. And I think it was my youngest daughter who said, or put two words together that I had never heard before in the same sentence, Paris and sucks. We rewarded her positive attitude by serving her a dinner of French andouillette, also known as pig colon, which helped to reframe her definition of sucks. One of the things I also wanted to do was to write a book, and I thought moving abroad would give me the time and focus to do so. One day, I wandered into this little cafe called Caféothèque. It looked a little bit different from most Parisian cafes. There were no French waiters with white aprons, no high cane-back chairs and outside seating, no French food. I got a latte, sat down, opened my laptop, got ready to write. And I took a sip of that latte, put it to my mouth, and it astounded me. It was the smoothest, the richest, the boldest, most flavorful coffee I had ever had. And I walked up to Gloria, who was standing behind the counter, who had served me this drink, and I said, "What are you doing that makes this so amazing?" And she told me a few things. She said that Caféothèque is ranked as the #1 coffee spot in Paris out of 35,000 bistros and cafes. She also told me that her and her husband own and run Caféothèque and that they serve 20 types of single origin beans, and they visit every plantation around the world themselves and insist on paying a fair trade price for those beans. She sends her best baristas to visit those plantations so they can understand the entire coffee making process. She holds coffee tastings, just like you might have wine tastings. And she has something called Caféothèque University, which is a way in which people who are budding baristas can come and learn and study under her and her husband. And they then go off, after they learn cafeology, as she talks about it, they go off and start their own cafes around France and in far-off places as China and Ethiopia. So as I sat there listening to her story, I was blown away and surprised by the incredible game changer that they had created in the midst of Paris, let alone for any cafe anywhere. And I just wondered, I had spent 20 years of my life focused on innovation and what does it mean to create breakthroughs, and I couldn't help but ask myself, was it any accident that I was sitting inside of a breakthrough? So I went out and I did research on the topic of surprise, which is exactly what I experienced. And I wanted to talk to leaders who I thought were game-changing leaders to understand the backstories of their more public success stories. And what I concluded was that there's a huge missing ingredient when it comes to innovation. And it's this element of surprise, not just in how we identify and come up with the big ideas, but especially in the process of implementing them and making them real. So I told my publisher, hey, I want to reframe my book and talk about innovation and breakthroughs and the power of surprise. And they said, businesses don't want surprise. Companies hate surprises. 400 million. What does that number represent? Size of the middle class in India? Net worth of the Kardashians? It's the number of search results you get when you Google the word innovation. We've seen the dot-com bubble. We've seen the real estate bubble. I say that we are in an innovation bubble. There's never been more knowledge or resources on the topic. Everyone's buying into the term. There's no shortage of books, magazines, articles, blogs, experts, boot camps, seminars, consulting firms, all talking about how to come up with big ideas. And we know that if we don't innovate, someone else will. Just look at the recent casualties. Blockbuster, Borders, BlackBerry. I guess the first lesson is we shouldn't go out and get a name for our companies that start with the letter B. The problem is that we hope and assume that if we put all the right templates and tools and methodologies into that big corporate meat grinder, that we'll get innovation. I think we've forgotten that the main syllable in the word innovation is no. And that's exactly what we get when we mechanistically feed the meat grinder. Even with the best business school ingredients. What letter does business school start with? When I was at HP running the strategy group in the late 1990s, I fed that meat grinder. We told people, take your breakthrough idea and put it into this 10-step planning template. Oh, and by the way, if you could just fill in this spreadsheet and prove your idea will be $1 billion in 3 years, then we might give you funding. I looked at uncertainty and surprise as the things that would contaminate the entire process. The other problem is that businesses have taken a blanket approach to uncertainty. Good surprises, they're seen as irrelevant. You can't predict them, and you surely can't run your business hoping for them. So our entire focus is on the negative, which basically means, bad surprises, anything outside of our plans. We've learned to hate surprise so much that if you go onto Amazon and search for management books with the word surprise in their titles, every one of them, 100% of them, are about how to avoid, prevent, or minimize the phenomenon. And it makes sense, right? Surprises are the antithesis of management. The psychologist Erich Fromm once noted that once people go through the process of education, they believe they need to know everything, and that to be surprised by anything is a sign of ignorance. Many leaders, they don't like to talk about the times they've been caught off guard. It's seen as a sign that maybe they're weak or they weren't leading or managing. Our modern culture holds an unquestionable assumption that predictability and control leads to personal and business success. And surprises, the core essence of uncertainty, they're our worst enemies. So here's the fundamental problem. We've demonized one of the most natural aspects of life and business, and one of the most important ingredients to coming up with and creating breakthroughs. So I argue that if we want to break out in order to break through, we have to look at that elephant in the room. And there's two aspects to this. First, I found that research actually shows that our brains are wired to appreciate positive surprise. It's like the time when I took that first sip of coffee and learned about the cafe, or maybe the time when you picked up an iPad for the first time, or went to a performance of Cirque du Soleil. When we experience positive surprise, the pleasure centers of our brains, they light up. And a few things happen. We want to understand what it is that surprised us. How does it work? We may want to experience more of it. But most importantly, we want to share it with others. So there's a huge social element to surprise. I mean, think about the viral YouTube videos that you see flying around the net, or the way that Apple withholds product information and announcements and creates market frenzies. It's all about surprise. So the first point is that game-changing breakthroughs, when we first experience them, they give us a feeling of positive surprise because they challenge our assumptions and they add value to our lives, and that these are the things that we as innovators, we want to create for the world. But here's point number 2, and really the subtle catch. If we want to create breakthroughs that surprise others, we have to go through a process of living with uncertainty, wrestling with ambiguity, and opening ourselves up to the positive and the negative surprises that really will inevitably come our way. Living in that fog of uncertainty doesn't feel comfortable. It feels like we're out of control. But these are the very feelings that are necessary and natural when we're going for something big and trying to chart new territory. The unpredictable things we experience are opportunities to challenge our assumptions and our mindsets about whatever we're doing. This is what happened to me in that cafe, and I believe anyone can use surprises as tools for innovation. And I found some incredible examples of this in business, in nonprofits, in education. One of the examples is right here in the Silicon Valley. This company has a value for surprise in its culture. They ask employees to savor surprise, as they call it. Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, had a great product in the 1990s called Quicken. It was for balancing your checkbooks at home. But something bugged him and his team. They kept hearing that small businesses were using their software. And they knew this was impossible because small businesses need real accounting software. And this was just for balancing your home checkbook. They put off that data. They didn't listen to it for over a year. Finally, they decided to figure out why it kept coming up for them, and they looked into it, and they got a couple surprises. The first, and these are financially minded software engineers, they learned that small business owners, they don't like accounting. It's hard, it's no fun. They didn't start their businesses to be accountants, so they were using the wrong software because it was easy. They went back and created a product called QuickBooks. Within 3 months of launching QuickBooks, they had 70% market share. There's another example from the nonprofit world. Victoria Hale is the founder of One World Health. It's the first nonprofit pharmaceutical company. She was an executive at a large pharmaceutical firm, and she went to New York City for a conference. She got into a taxi cab, struck up a conversation with the driver. He was of African descent, and as they were talking, she told him what she did and why she was there. And he threw his head back and kind of laughed sarcastically and said, "You people have all the money." That was a jarring surprise for her. It made her realize that she needed to do something. She needed to make a difference. And that her pharmaceutical firm and many others have on the shelf something called leads. These are technologies they've developed to solve problems and challenges like diarrhea that kill millions of children a year. And so she decided to create One World Health, a nonprofit, to take these leads from any pharmaceutical company and allow them to get a tax deduction in return. And then take these leads, and she will take them and develop them in the countries that most need them. So there's an economic benefit and then a health benefit. And her nonprofit's saving thousands of lives a year. Surprises are also found as a force for breakthroughs in education. Dave Levin is the co-founder of the Knowledge is Power program, also known as KIPP. KIPP is a network of 100 charter schools with 27,000 students. 90% are minorities and 70% live below the poverty line. Early on, Dave had about 12 students, one of his first classes in inner city Houston, and he was really happy when the school district gave him a dozen more. And he sat one group of students, the existing students, at one end of the room facing the middle, and to show the students that this was going to be a different kind of learning experience, he sat the others facing the existing students. But what he didn't know is that they were from rival gangs. That was a big negative surprise and resulted in a couple things. Betting pools as to how long Dave Levin would last at the school till the end of the year, but also it challenged his mindset, and he realized he needed to create a way to move kids' allegiance away from their gangs and to a commitment to each other and to the school and to the learning process. And so today, KIPP is known for its songs and chants, just like you might find at summer camp. And it's working. KIPP has a 90% graduation rate from college. So what do all these stories have in common? These leaders tapped in to the power of surprise to create their breakthroughs. They didn't fight against those unexpected things that were happening to them. They looked into the heart of their unexpected events and their surprises to challenge their beliefs and their personal assumptions. I believe we need a new mindset for innovation, that the power of surprise is a natural part of life, so it should be for business, and that anyone can tap into it at any time. Good or bad events and surprises, they contain guideposts for us to look at and interpret and figure out what they're telling us about our possible futures. When we internalize this, I believe we can better seek out and respond to and recognize surprises when they're happening around us. So I don't believe there's a universal cookbook for breakthrough innovation, but by harnessing the power of surprise, I think we can all create our personal recipes for doing big things that surprise others and add value to their lives. Let's put that in the corporate meat grinder. Thank you.